Okay, here we go again. We continue our series where we talk about Stoicism, going through the entire book, the Enchiridion, in the translation How to Be Free by Professor A.A. Long. And we had arrived at chapter 42, which is an interesting one. Whenever people treat you badly or criticize you, remember that they are only doing and saying what they think is appropriate for them. They cannot take their lead from your opinion, but only from their own. So if their opinion is incorrect, they are the people who suffer harm because they are the ones who got it wrong. When someone takes a true conjunctive statement to be false, no harm is done to the statement, but only to the person making the mistake. If you start out from this position, you will be indulgent to your critics and tell yourself each time that's what they thought. This bit about conjunctive statements, that's a part of formal logic, Stoic logic, and I don't think we have to go into that to fully appreciate this chapter. What Epictetus is getting at, I think, is something that we have discussed before, which is sort of a Socratic truth, something that Socrates believed in, that you also find in Plato, for example. And it's a very interesting way, I think, to look at the world. And that way is, people do not willingly do evil. They just do what they think is right for them at that specific point in time. Now, of course, the problem therein lies that what is good for them at that moment in time may not be good for you at that moment in time, and that can lead to certain frustrations. Now, when it comes to criticism, one of the things I really appreciate about Epictetus is that he is very practical, a very pragmatically oriented philosopher who gives very practical advice. And you see that here too. Criticism is something that we all have to deal with, some people more than others maybe, but at one point or another you deal with it, whether it is because you are studying, or whether it is at work, or whether it is because you are a YouTuber and nobody ever leaves you a nasty, mean or criticizing comment. We all deal with that, and I like what Epictetus gets at here. So if you approach that criticism with the attitude of, well, first of all, they don't willingly do evil. The person criticizing you is not trying to be evil, trying to be mean. That person simply does what he or she thinks is right to do at that given point in time. So that's the first thing. And then I really like the second part of, they cannot take their lead from your opinion, but only from their own. So if their opinion is incorrect, they are the people who suffer harm because they are the ones who got it wrong. Now, you could make the case that the difficult thing in this situation is to determine who is right and who is wrong, right? And that, right? Yes. I think that is where, as we've talked about before, that is where one of the aspects of Stoic virtue comes along, which is wisdom, practical wisdom, knowing what the right decision is, for example, or what the right thing to do is in a certain situation. Now, we have also talked about criticism a few times because it pops up relatively regularly in the Enchiridion, for example. And we already talked about the idea of, if the person criticizing you is right, then you don't really have anything to worry about because that person is right, and they are probably correct in pointing out that you are doing something wrong. What may matter then is how they do it, right? But in principle, you don't really have any reason to get upset if they are right. If they are wrong, well, then you also don't really have a reason to get upset because they are wrong. Why would you get upset if you know full well that someone is wrong? But as I said, the real trick lies in figuring out who is right and who is wrong. Now, I think the most important thing in giving someone criticisms is that you do that in a constructive manner, which is something that seems to be utterly lost on the world at this moment, because I don't think anyone really understands what that means anymore. Social media have given people a platform, and they think that they should now give their opinion in every way possible, and they don't really consider the feelings or the psyche or the emotions of other people. They just say what they want in the bluntest fashion possible, because they can hide behind an anonymous profile, for example. So I think that has become a bit of an issue of our time, but that is not necessarily something we can change, except for not falling in the trap of doing that ourselves, right? That way you can give someone criticism that is constructive and that may actually help that person without being mean, sarcastic, upsetting, or just kind of downright evil about it, right? So I think that that's an important point. Now, you have received some criticism and now you are turning to Epictetus, and Epictetus tells you another very interesting way to deal with it. So now we have talked about if someone is right, you shouldn't be upset. If someone is wrong, you shouldn't be upset. Another thing we talked about at some point is his Epictetus's idea of the rock, right? If someone insults you, picture a rock. What happens to a rock when you insult it? Nothing, right? So that's another sort of tool you can put in your toolbox, your toolkit to deal with criticism that may upset you, right? You just try to be like a rock, and you just don't let yourself be affected. Not so easy. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying it's something you can practice. Something that I am still practicing on a daily basis. But now you get a third tool, right? Because he says, when someone takes a true conjunctive statement to be false, again, this is something from formal Stoic logic. We don't have to bother ourselves with the details, but something is in reality true and someone says it is false. Okay? No harm is done to the statement, but only to the person making the mistake. And in a way, that is true, right? The statement doesn't care because it's just a statement. But the person who is wrong about that statement, that person may actually suffer because they are wrong. Now, to be honest, I think that a lot of people in our society, when they leave someone negative criticisms, they don't cry themselves to sleep thinking, oh, I shouldn't have said that. I don't think that's a realistic worldview. I also don't think they will repent. I do think that this is an interesting way to look at things, because even if they don't cry themselves to sleep, so to speak, if you know that you are right and you know that they are wrong, you know that they're the ones who suffer. And if you take this, if you look at this on a broader scale and the grander scale, so that they would call it the grand scheme of things, that is something that with these videos that I'm trying to get at. What is the most important thing to a Stoic? Virtue. Doing the right thing, making the right decisions, doing the just thing, being courageous, doing things in moderation. All of those things matter to a Stoic, are important to a Stoic. Maybe the most important thing in the life of a Stoic is continuously that, doing, saying, thinking the right thing, the virtuous thing. Now, if someone criticizes you unfairly, right? Unfair criticism, not fair criticism, not just criticism, unfair criticism. That is what Epictetus talks about, because he says when someone takes a true conjunctive statement to be false, in other words, when they are wrong, right, they will suffer because they're the ones being wrong, right? And saying that something is wrong when in reality it is right, or when in reality it is true, is not virtuous. If I hold up, for example, this object, and I tell you this is for sure black, I am wrong. How could it be virtuous to tell you that that is black, whereas in reality it is white? It doesn't make any sense, right? So that is an important thing, I think, to keep remembering as well. It doesn't reflect on you if someone gives you an unfair, untrue criticism. It reflects on them. And because it reflects on them, you should not be bothered by it. Small things, but all of these small things add up and change the way you look at the world. And that, in my mind, is the power of Stoicism. It changes the way you look at things. And every time you get something else out of it. I started recording this video. Of course, I had read this chapter before, not just for the video, but also before in my life. I've read the Enchiridion a few times before. But right now it clicks with me again. This is something that I needed to hear today, because I was actually pondering criticism and unfair feedback, YouTube, whatever, a lot in the past days. And now I feel better again. So I don't want to make this some sort of personal therapy session, but what I'm trying to say is, this is the power of Stoicism. It is not a vague type of philosophy practiced by philosophy professors in ivory towers at universities. This is something for life, something that you can apply to your life to make your life better. And that is why I hope people are still enjoying these videos and find something to take away from them. Okay, I hope this was useful. We are making good progress in this book. We're almost done. And I think after that, Marcus Aurelius. Not the whole meditations, because some are very complicated and some are long, some are difficult, some are quite simply incomprehensible, but I do think there's enough there to go over that. So let's prepare for that. But first, of course, we finish the Enchiridion. I hope this was useful, my friends. I'll gladly see you later. Bye bye.